Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the 2025-26 NBA GM survey is out, and it is overall surprisingly complimentary of the Timberwolves, especially Anthony Edwards, Chris Finch, and also a couple of surprises. We'll dig in on the GM survey next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. We are just over a week away from actual real live regular season Timberwolves basketball. Preseason rolls on tomorrow. But today I want to hit the annual NBA.com NBA GM survey, which is always a lot of fun. And it came out late last week. Friday's show, we talked about the preseason game against the Knicks on Thursday. So I want to lock in on this GM survey today. There is really kind of a lot of interesting stuff in there. There's some great Ant stuff. There's a surprising amount of accolades, which I'll explain why I think that's pretty telling about the Timberwolves coaching staff, Chris Finch specifically, but also his lead assistant. We'll talk a lot of Ant stuff, of course, maybe less Jaden McDaniels than I would have expected, but some surprise categories in there too. So we'll go through that today. I'll react to any of the other surprises along the way within the survey, but especially all the Timberwolves stuff. And that's what we got for you here on tap today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So this is the annual NBA GM survey at NBA.com. John Schumann puts it out. John Schumann does a fantastic job at NBA.com. If you're a regular listener, you know his power rankings are really the only ones that I put any credence behind because he really digs into the numbers, does a great job, and he puts this survey together as well. Of course, the obvious caveat here is it really these GMs answering the question, or is it, who is Tim Conley's not technically the GM. I guess Matt Lloyd is the GM in Minnesota, I believe. Who's actually filling the survey out? We don't know. There's 49 overall questions. Important to keep in mind, teams cannot vote for their own player. And also, not every question was answered by all 30 GMs. So John points out that percentages under each question are based on the pool of respondents and not necessarily all 30 GMs. So important to know that. Note that. So, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the Wolves. The first prediction, who's going to win the finals, 80% of people said the Thunder. Now, last year, 83% said the Celtics, which, of course, the idea of repeating, it's a very hard thing to do. And perhaps the Celtics would have done it had it not been for the Jason Tatum injury. That's entirely possible. I mean, the Pacers still pushed the Thunder to 7 games. Sitting here right now, everyone's, the Thunder are the overwhelming favorite. And I would agree, the Thunder should win the title again. Well, should isn't maybe the right word. I get why they're the favorite. I would pick them. But it's easy to forget how close they came to not winning last year too, despite the fact they were super dominant in the regular season. So anyway, 80% for the Thunder, and then the only other teams that really, well, I guess the Cavs and Nuggets each got 7%, and then the Rockets and Knicks also received a vote. Top of the East, Cleveland, New York, Orlando, Atlanta, probably how I would have it too. The top of the Eastern Conference, you could argue Milwaukee could be up there. I don't know that I'd go Detroit there. But anyway, that's what the East looks like according to this GM survey. The West, Oklahoma City, number 1, 87% of the votes for first, and then Denver, Houston, and then Minnesota. Minnesota had the most votes for, Houston had the most for third, but they had the second most for second. Minnesota had the most third place votes, and they were tied for the most fourth place votes. So a lot of people having Minnesota or Houston in some order in that 2, 3, 4 range. And then Golden State was the next team up. Although relatively far behind Minnesota. I thought that was interesting that Golden State was 5, Clippers 6, and Lakers 7. A lot of the other national power rankings and stuff and West predictions have the Lakers and Clippers ahead of Golden State and in some cases ahead of Minnesota. So I thought that was notable. Again, this is actual NBA front offices voting on this. Last year, OKC was picked to win the West by 80%, which happened. And then after the Thunder, it was Minnesota, Denver, Dallas. And obviously Minnesota finished 6th, and Denver finished a little bit lower than, well, actually, they finished strong last season after they fired Michael Malone. But anyway, that it wasn't far off in terms of what the order was voted on last year. Who's going to win the MVP? Anthony Edwards was one of the players also receiving votes. Jokic, of course, got 67%. Interesting, he got that much, and SGA only got 8% of the vote. I thought that was pretty fascinating. It's hard to win back-to-back MVPs. Jokic has done it. Apparently, people think he's going to win a 4th this year. I would argue he's the best player in the league. Luka got 2nd place with 10% of the vote. And again, SGA 3rd place with 8% of the vote. Thought that was notable. Looks like probably one team voted for Anthony Edwards. And again, we know teams couldn't vote for their own guys, so it wasn't the Wolves that voted for Ant. But anyway, thought that was interesting. Other Timberwolves mentions, scrolling on down the list, skipping past some of the stuff that isn't perhaps all that surprising. Well, actually, real quick, on the Ant for MVP thing, I do want to kind of make that case. I believe I made the case a few weeks ago, and I was talking about some of my bold predictions for this year. I didn't actually include Ant as like as that wasn't one of them, Ant as MVP. But what in my bold predictions part 2, I talked about Anthony Edwards leading the league in scoring, which of course is a path to the MVP. If he leads the league in scoring and the Wolves are a top 2 seed in the West or whatever, then yeah, he probably wins MVP. I think he could pass Jokic in points per game. I mean, remember, Jokic is going to he's got more guys on that team that are going to score a little bit. Jokic would rather pass than score. Last year was an abnormal Jokic year. Can he pass SGA is the big question. And then also there's Giannis in the Eastern Conference, with Giannis needing to do more from a scoring standpoint. No Dame, right? Giannis could put up a ton of points. I actually I don't have the FanDuel odds in front of me for Anthony Edwards, but the Ant odds for MVP are they're not bad. If you're looking at somebody who's not a consensus top 1 or 2, top 1, but he's not the favorite, or maybe even top 2 or consensus top 3 MVP candidates. I mean, Ant's finished 3rd in the league in scoring last year. It's on the table. He could lead the league in scoring. This is a good team. And the Wolves are going to be probably a top 4 or 5 team in a really good Western Conference. And if Ant just scores a little bit more and this team's a little bit better, if they outperform, projections and what they did last season with the 49 wins, if they bounce back in the upper 50s, I mean, the case for Ant for MVP isn't all that far-fetched. So I the odds I think matter here. If I was just picking it all just straight up, I wouldn't pick Ant to win MVP. But if you factor in those odds, I mean, I don't know, this side of SGA, Jokic, and Giannis. Now, again, MVP and leading scorer are 2 different things. If Denver is the 2 seed and Jokic has an insane statistical season but doesn't score as much as he did last year, it's possible Ant could lead the league in scoring and not win MVP. I think that's also on the table for sure. No Timberwolves listed under which players most likely to have a breakout season. Not surprising, but there were 12 guys listed, which was a little surprising. It's also a weird question in terms of how you want to take it. Last year, the winner was Jalen Williams. That was pretty good. He went from, I don't know, what was he? People thought he was a top 50, 60 player. And then now he's a consensus top 20 guy. So that was a really accurate pick last year by the GMs. The next Minnesota related one, the best shooting guard in the NBA, Anthony Edwards won that one with the second. I guess the vote share was actually pretty high for all these positions. Ant won it with 70% of the vote. Donovan Mitchell got 13%. I don't think it's reasonable. You could make the argument Donovan Mitchell's better than Ant, but Ant has already had more playoff success than Donovan Mitchell. And in general, given their age and experience, Ant's teams have done better than Donovan Mitchell's teams. I know the regular season that the Cavs had last year is crazy, but and then you add in the defense, Ant's a better defender. So Ant 70% of that vote. Donovan Mitchell got 13%. Luka's a weird one. He got 2nd for best point guard, tied for 3rd for best shooting guard, and was 1st for best small forward in the NBA, for whatever that's worth. That was Luka. SGA got best point guard, Luka best small forward, Giannis 93% for best power forward, and Jokic got 97% best center. The only other guy who got a vote would have been Wemby, and of course Denver couldn't have voted for Jokic, so that's clearly what Denver's vote was on that one. Next, I want to hit some of the, like, as we get into the categories about offseason moves, there actually wasn't really any Timberwolves there, but you get into coaching staffs and defense. There's a lot more Minnesota mentions, more Timberwolves coaching staff mentions. Chris Finch, and yes, Micah Nori makes an appearance in the GM survey. We're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move. Whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors, this is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. Plus, the swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. Plus, the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right. The second piece of the survey, skipping through the offseason stuff, there's no Timberwolves mentions there. There's no rookie international player stuff about the Wolves, but you get into the defense. And obviously, Wemby won the best defensive player of the year or best defensive player in the NBA vote. Gobert tied for second with Evan Mobley, and there were a couple other guys like Lu Dort and Giannis each got votes too. Like, I don't know. Lu Dort's great. He's not the best defensive player in the league. Gobert tied for second in votes there, which I thought was interesting. He was also second under who is the best interior defender in the NBA. And there were three other guys. Zubats, Mobley, and Anthony Davis all got votes as well. Wemby got 80%. Gobert got 10%. And then I thought it was equally as interesting that there were no Timberwolves players mentioned under the question, who's the most versatile defender in the NBA? There were, let's see, 8, 9, 10, 11 players received some semblance of a vote for this category, and there was not a single Timberwolves player under most versatile defender. I'll give you an idea of some of the guys. Amen Thompson won it with 18%. Draymond got 17%. Giannis got 13%. Giannis, incidentally, won this category last year. And then other guys that got votes, Dyson Daniels with the Hawks, Evan Mobley, Victor Wembanyama, OG Anunoby, Lu Dort, Tumani Kamara, Tari Eason, and Oscar Thompson all got votes for most versatile defender. I was a little bit surprised that Jaden McDaniels didn't get any votes. I know he's like, that's also, how do you take that question? I think of switchability. Can you guard on the perimeter and can you rim protect? And without digging into like the block rates and stuff like that, and opponent field goal percentage when you're the closest defender and all that stuff, I think you can make the argument that Jaden McDaniels should be in that conversation. Like, somebody should have given him a vote. Like, again, how do you read versatile? Because I mean, like, Lu Dort's not protecting the rim, but he's super switchable. He's a great defensive player. Wemby's, you don't want Wemby on the opposing point guard, but he's super switchable. And for a guy his size with that length and athleticism, it's crazy what he does, right? Not arguing against that. But yeah, I think of more switchable guys who can guard ideally 1 through 5, right? Like that's kind of the idea here. I'd say Jaden's pretty close to that. You don't want Jaden guarding like a back to the basket center, but in the same way, you don't like Lu Dort's not protecting the rim either, really. So I thought that was a little bit interesting that there was no Jaden love there, especially given the next question, which is the best defensive team in the NBA? Of course, the Thunder got 83% of the vote. I'm not going to argue at all. The Wolves are better than the Thunder defensively. I'm not trying to do that. But the Wolves tied for second with 7% of the vote, which means they likely had two teams that voted for them as the best defensive team in the league. Maybe one of those votes is the Thunder because they couldn't vote for themselves, but the Magic also got 7%, and the Houston Rockets got a vote. They got 3% of the vote. I remember last year, like, having a conniption about the Celtics getting a 57% for best defensive team in the NBA. The Wolves did not win that category, despite having the best defensive team by far last year in the regular season. Now, what have you done for me lately, league? The Celtics were coming off the title when the survey was conducted, so of course Boston did it all the way through the finals. But Minnesota got to the conference finals last year and was the best defensive team in the league. And yet this year, despite being 6th last year when it was all said and done in defensive rating, Minnesota finishes tied for second in this GM survey vote of the best defensive team in the NBA. So I thought that was fascinating. Related to that, the coach questions really caught me off guard. Best head coach, there's only 5 guys that got votes: Spoelstra, Dagno, Ty Lue. Spoelstra, by the way, 52%, Dagno, 34%, and then Rick Carlisle and Nick Nurse each got votes. Best manager and motivator of people, no Chris Finch mentions. Which head coach makes the best in-game adjustments? Chris Finch was under also receiving votes, which I thought was fascinating. That's not what I would say about Chris Finch. Like, Chris Finch is a great coach, really good, easily a top 10 coach, arguably a top 6 or 7 coach. I think there's a very clear argument you can make there based on team success. In-game adjustments is not like my top thing for Chris Finch. Ty Lue won that one with 40%. Dagno coming second with 23%. Which head coach runs the best offense? Chris Finch tied for second in this one. Carlisle, an overwhelming favorite with 53%. Kenny Atkinson of the Cavs and Chris Finch each got 10%, which probably was 3 teams worth of votes for both of them. Dagno and Steve Kerr finished behind them at 7% each. And then a bunch of guys got 1 vote. So there were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 coaches that received at least 1 vote. And Finch got 3 votes for the best run offense in the league. And again, I wouldn't argue he runs a better offense than Rick Carlisle or even Kenny Atkinson. In fact, I understand why they'd be voted ahead of Chris Finch. I wouldn't vote Mark Dagno. I would say, again, how do you take this question? Are you looking for the most innovative offense, for the most exciting offense? If you say the best offense, I mean, you could argue the Thunder. It's not complicated what they're trying to do. It's pretty obvious, but it works, right? So, I understand why Finch finished ahead of Dagno. I don't have a problem with that. Steve Kerr finished tied for 4th. Carlisle won it last year too, by the way. 47%, 53% this year. Best defensive schemes, Chris Finch also got a vote there. Finished under also receiving votes. One of 7 coaches. So one of 11 coaches to receive a vote, or 1 of 10 for the best offense, and 1 of 7 for the best defense. This is the one that I thought was fascinating. The best assistant coach in the NBA. Micah Nori, number 1 by himself at 25%. Last year, Micah Nori and Sam Cassell tied at 17%. And I said, all right, this is just because everyone saw him at the, sitting on the front row of the bench after the Chris Finch patella tendon injury last year in the first round, and Mike Conley ran into him. And Micah Nori essentially ran things for a while and was the face of the Wolves in press conferences, et cetera. I just all right, people just knew who he is. He's still number 1 and easily number 1 here. Had 2-3 more votes than the next most votes. Number 2 is Jeff Van Gundy of the Clippers. Cassell tied with Nori last year. He tied for 4th with only 7% this year. I was pretty surprised that Nori got, what is that? That's a quarter of the league. So he got, you'd like to think I could do math better than this, but he got 10 votes? Nope. 8 votes, 9 votes, something like that. Surprising. He did interview for the Knicks job. He interviewed for, I think, 1 other job. But good to see him get some of that, some love. I think some of those adjustments that Chris Finch was getting credit for, Micah Nori is a big piece of that, right? He's his right-hand guy. Another coaching related one, which active player will make the best head coach one day? Mike Conley got tied for second with TJ McConnell of the Pacers next to Chris Paul. So he did make it in there as a potential good future head coach. A couple other Wolves mentions here that will close us out. And then I think the most surprising, a couple of surprising ones overall that aren't necessarily Wolves related that we'll get to here, but we'll keep rolling through the Timberwolves mentions in the NBA GM survey here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. The NFL season is now into week 6, and FanDuel has an offer that you won't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I said we're into week 6 is wrapping up right now, actually. And you look ahead and this next week there's 2 games tonight for Monday Night Football. You have Bears at Commanders and Bills at Falcons are both fascinating games. I would take the Bills minus 4.5 at Atlanta. And I don't mind the Bears plus 4.5 at the Commanders. I think that's a close game. So I maybe take the points. I take the Bears plus 4.5 there, but take the Falcons at home favorites against the Bills. I think that's a reasonable approach there. Falcons Bills -4.5 at Atlanta, Bears +4.5 on the road against the Commanders. You can also live bet the games. You can same game parlay, whatever you want to do tonight. Follow along on the FanDuel app. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And even when you don't have the full picture, you can still end up leaving money on the table. And that is why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Simply put, don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. All right, a couple final Timberwolves mentions here. Skipping back up real quick. Well, actually, no. Well, I'll do that in a second. Past the coaching stuff, the Timberwolves were on this list for one of the most fun teams to watch in the league, which I think the Wolves also are often ranked lower than they should here. It's most fun teams to watch. The Nuggets and Thunder each tied with 27%. The Pacers at 20%, which I would agree with, although they're going to be less fun to watch with no Tyrese Haliburton, which is obviously not their fault. And part of the reason they're fun is Rick Carlisle and how creative they are and how deep their team has been. But no Tyrese Haliburton makes them maybe less fun to watch. The Thunder, that's a weird one. Like, I don't know. They're fun to watch-ish. Like, I like watching Chet Holmgren. I like watching J-Dub. I like watching them wreak havoc on the perimeter. The SGA is a bit of a tougher watch offensively. Obviously, an incredible shooter still in the mid-range, and some of the stuff he does getting to his spots is great. But I would, Nuggets 27%, absolutely. I'm okay with the Pacers, although minus Haliburton, not as much. The Warriors and Wolves tied for fourth with 7%. Then the Pistons, Rockets, Lakers, Magic all get votes. I wouldn't vote for any of those teams over the Timberwolves as far as fun to watch. I understand Denver. I understand to an extent OKC and Indiana and the Warriors for that matter, because Steph is still fun to watch. But the Wolves tied for fourth there. I think, and I agree with this. Obviously, I'm biased. I watch every single Timberwolves game. But like Anthony Edwards, you could see something you've never seen before every single night. Like, it's on the table. And also the defensive upside for the Wolves is pretty phenomenal. And then you add in some other fun guys like TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham. Like, these guys can do crazy stuff offensively, and the compete factor on defense overall for the team is pretty incredible. So I understand why Minnesota ranks high there. Best home court advantage, I just thought this was interesting. Denver and OKC tied with 43%. The Knicks, Celtics, and Cavs were the others that got votes. Which team will have the league's most efficient offense? The Cavs got 40% of the vote. The Thunder got 30%. The Nuggets got 20%. The Wolves, Pacers, and Knicks also received votes. Most efficient is not how I would describe what I expect out of the Wolves offense this year. I think the Wolves will have a good offense. I think there's a real chance, and I believe I had this in my bold predictions too, that I had them as like, I had them as a top 5 offense this year. My reasoning is pretty simple. I think Ant gets better. I think the offensive upside, the offensive ceiling, if you will, is higher by replacing Nickeil Alexander-Walker with Terrence Shannon Jr. and some Rob Dillingham. Year 2 of Julius Randle alongside Ant and Rudy. And then also Jaden continues to improve offensively. I think all those things together, to me, look like they really could be a top 5 offense this season, which I guess factors in efficiency. But if you said who's the most efficient offense in the league, the Wolves would not be one of the first 3 teams I named. And they were, I guess, technically they were one of 6 teams that got votes for most efficient offense this season. Which team's level of success is toughest to predict? The Sixers, the runaway favorites here, 47%. Nobody else got more than 2 votes. I get that. I would say the Sixers or the Mavs, and then I would put the Lakers in that conversation because Luka could drag them to 50-plus wins, and they could be below 500 because there's no depth on that team, right? The Grizzlies, similar deal. I guess the Sixers, obviously, the health stuff for Embiid, among others, Paul George. So that makes sense to me. And I also understand the Wolves not being there. The Wolves have a pretty high floor. Again, this is, you can't factor in the possibility of injury because that could befall any team. So given relatively average health, the Wolves have a pretty high floor of a high 40 win team. They won 49 games last year, had bad luck in terms of their point differential. They overachieved a little to 56 wins a couple years ago. Realistically, they're probably somewhere in the middle. And that their floor is probably around that 49 win mark, right? Like there's not really a path to them being much worse than that. And they're probably not going to win 60 plus games. They're going to be in the low 50s is the most likely scenario. So I get them not being mentioned there. Which team is the most promising young core? The Thunder got 50% of the vote. The Spurs got 27%. I would say, yeah, the Spurs core is promising. I don't know that it fits together. Castle and Harper and Wemby doesn't fit super seamlessly together. Last year, the Thunder got 60% of the vote, by the way. Which player is the most athletic? Ahmed Thompson got 58% of the vote. Ant got 23%. Nobody else got more than one vote. And there were a bunch of guys like Giannis and LeBron are still getting votes in the year of our Lord 2025. Crazy. But Ahmed with 58% and Ant with 23%. Number 2 in the league. One of only 2 guys that got more than one vote. Definitely notable. Only other Wolves notes. Best leader, under best leader, Conley and Edwards each got a vote. They were 2 of 10 guys that got votes. And then, well, actually, no, I guess that was it in terms of Timberwolves mentions. But I did want to talk about what I thought was one of the more interesting omissions of the whole thing, and that's Nickeil Alexander-Walker not being mentioned under best offseason moves, which might seem kind of crazy because it's like, it's just Nickeil. Like, why would this be such a big deal? Not an intentional rhyme there. Well, the reason why I think it's fascinating is because it's cited everywhere about, the offseason move stuff. The Ant thing is always a huge reason for why the Hawks, the Naw thing is always why, like, the Hawks are going to be so much better this year. And the Wolves are in big trouble because of losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? We see that all the time. And I don't say this, I don't make this point to take away from Nickeil Alexander-Walker at all. But the fact that he's not listed under most underrated player, and maybe that's why, I guess, and that's part of the point here, is it's not an underrated player acquisition because everyone's talking about it all the time. Now, somehow Desmond Bane got first in this, like, that's been talked about a lot more than the Nickeil thing. I'm exactly like, it's hyperbole a little bit here to say people are talking about the Nickeil thing all the time, but it's often cited as a problem and why Minnesota might be an under their win total 49.5 and why Minnesota might not be a top 3 or 4 seed in the West. It's like, they lost to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And that's the only reason people could give why they could possibly be worse than they were last year, but yet not big enough to make a dent in terms of the underrated player acquisition category in the GM survey. Desmond Bane, the Cam Johnson, which I would argue, like, if you're saying the most underrated player acquisition, the 2 that jump out to me are Cam Johnson to the Nuggets and Dorian Finney-Smith to the Rockets. Those are the 2 that I think are the most underrated. Like, Drew Holiday to Portland, they're going to be fine. They're going to be better than people think, but like, that's not lifting them really. Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta is on here. DeAndre Ayton to the Lakers, nuts that anybody voted for that. Beal to the Clippers, I can see that simply because the expectations will be lowered. He's a nice player for what he's going to be asked to do there versus being a true big 3 max contract guy in Phoenix. Norman Powell to Miami, I get that one. Some of the rest of these, like, I don't know. I was surprised that Nickeil wasn't mentioned, but I do think that gives some proper context to why the whole thing has been kind of weird. Like, it just got outsized because of some of those moments in the playoffs. And I don't say this to denigrate Nickeil at all, because he's fantastic. He's going to make a big difference in Atlanta, and the Wolves are going to miss him. But he's still a 7th or 8th guy on a championship caliber team. And most of the guys on this list aren't probably much better than that. But that's what kind of the point I'm making is it's odd to me that he didn't make it on this list in any way, shape, or form. Oh, one other thing I was going to mention, biggest steal in the draft, of course, Berger was mentioned. I missed that earlier. He was tied for 4th in this voting with 7% of the vote for biggest steal in the draft. And last year, TJ Shannon tied for number 1 with like 5 other guys at 10%. This is always one that gets really split up because everybody has guys they think are great in the draft. And turns out we're sitting here doing this survey before these guys have ever played a regular season game. But TJ Shannon tied for first last year in this for biggest steal in the draft, and that's certainly looking like a possibility. He was drafted in the 20s by Minnesota, and Beringer was drafted 17th in this year's draft by the Wolves, and he received a couple of votes for biggest steal in this year's draft in this GM survey. So I think that's notable. The biggest takeaways overall, like if we're boiling this whole thing down, it's, hey, this NBA GM survey is much more complimentary and thinks higher of the Timberwolves than, insert national media outlet or article or pundit or analyst or podcaster here. The NBA GMs still understand, like, hey, this team's been in the conference finals in consecutive years. They're well coached. They've got an ascendant superstar who's a top 5 player in the NBA, and they underachieved last year in a lot of ways. Whether it just be in the conference finals, it be in the regular season to the tune of just 49 wins and a 6 seed. But there's more here for this Timberwolves team, and I think NBA GMs feel that way. And the survey kind of underscores that. All right. So I got for you today. Tuesday, we'll talk a little bit about, it's a preseason game against the Chinese team on Tuesday night. So not a ton of a massive preview there. Pay attention on the feed. If it's not up already, actually, the Locked On NBA Squad Show West preview show. I was one of a few hosts on that show. So check that out when you get a chance on the feed. We talked a lot about the Wolves, especially early in the show, but a couple things late in the show as well. And I want to expand on a couple of nuggets that were brought up, which is a bit of a hint on who brought this up on the show. But a point that got brought up on that squad show that I want to dig in a bit more, probably on Tuesday, related to the Timberwolves playoff rotations and what they did against the Thunder and how Minnesota could match up with OKC looking ahead to the rest of the season. So we'll do that on tomorrow's show. And then Wednesday, we'll do a post-game pod after Tuesday night's game against the Chinese team that will be here stateside to take on the Timberwolves. That's all I got for you today. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast with the fantastic Josh Lloyd. It's the #1 fantasy basketball podcast out there. Josh will give you daily tips and help you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. You can find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just like this show, it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.